When a non-tech founder says we have a GTM problem, what do they usually think the problem is and what it is actually?
A lot of founders that I've talked to, they've built up their company off of certain things. And when you go to market, a lot of times they're looking to go cold, and a lot of companies don't have that type of experience.
What's the most common advice you feel non-tech founders get that sounds extremely smart in theory, but could cause damage when applied too early?
I think hiring sales reps when they actually haven't done the sales yet themselves. When SDRs, they're newer in their career, they're not going to figure it out that easy. They're going to make a lot of mistakes. A lot of companies will wait so long to go to market because they're trying to perfect the product, but then they forget that they've never actually gone to market to understand what the people want.
Most GTM advice sounds clean on slides. It assumes SaaS, it assumes clean data, it assumes buyer live on LinkedIn and reply to cold emails, but that's not how most founders are actually selling today. In this episode, I'm joined by John Karsant, founder of one of the world's top appointment setting firms who have spent years inside the messiest version of go-to-market, non-tech companies, new markets, no brand, no playbook, no margin for error. We talk about what founders think is a GTM problem versus what's actually broken, why hiring SDRs too early backfires, why agencies help and when they absolutely do not, where AI fits and where it quietly makes things worse, and how founders should really think about building GTM when there's no SaaS playbook to copy. This is not theory. It is pattern recognition from hundreds of real GTM motions that did not look pretty but worked. So if you're a founder trying to sell before you have a brand, before you have perfect data, or before you have figured out GTM the right way, this episode will save you months of bad decisions. And if you want more conversations like this, real GTM, real trade-off, no recycle advice, make sure you subscribe. Amazing. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Yeah, I think it's been long due. It's unfortunate that we are speaking right now. I think we've been connected for a while. I've seen some of your podcasts. I think the first podcast I probably heard was probably Surf and Sales, from what I remember.
Okay.
That was, I think, 1 year ago. And that's how I think I first found you, connected with your LinkedIn. Unfortunately, we never spoke about this. But I think you are all over the YouTube. And when I typed in your name, I think there were about 20 podcasts which came up. So you have been there talking about different things so far.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things about LinkedIn is you could stay connected, and then you never know what pops up later, and you can then also reconnect or reach out to somebody about whatever came up. And so that's how we reconnected.
Amazing. So John, you've spent years inside GTM motions where the advice sounds so clean on the outside, but the reality is kind of messy. And right now with AI everywhere, I think founders, they are thinking they're missing a tool when they're actually missing judgment. So I want to use this episode to unpack some of the GTM advice non-tech founders almost never hear, but desperately need. So when a non-tech founder says we have a GTM problem, what do they usually think the problem is and what it is actually?
Well, I think a lot of founders that I've talked to, they've built up their company off of certain things, like from the past. It could be relationships or conferences. And when you go to market, a lot of times people, or at least when they come to us, like they're looking to go cold. And a lot of companies don't have that type of experience. And it's a different beast than dealing with an inbound lead or dealing with someone you met at a conference or a referral. And so it's completely different in terms of how you want to approach that. I would try to set the lowest expectations, and then you can always build from there. I would also get some advice, reach out to somebody. There's lots of consultants that will help you in terms of how do you build this out, whether that's someone in-house or you reach out to like a consultant, as I say, is like some type of framework on expectations over time on how you should build this out, because it's not that easy. And it's easy for things to go wrong, right? So you could start building something out. And then what happens if the person you hire and get in place quits or gets another job, right? Like you need to build out a structure and like understand worst case scenarios, and how do you keep building the program when hiccups happen, because they're going to. It's just how this works. Is sales in the go-to-market space is not like the tenures aren't that long.
What's the most common advice you feel non-tech founders get that sounds extremely smart in theory, but could cause damage when applied too early?
I think hiring sales reps when they actually haven't done the sales yet themselves. When I say sales, I mean like the sales process, the sales development process. Oftentimes companies will think, okay, well, I'll just hire an SDR, but with no training or no direct manager or no processes to follow, I think the CEO or whoever is making this decision thinks, oh, they'll just figure it out. But typically SDRs, they're newer in their career and they're not going to figure it out that easy. They're going to make a lot of mistakes. And then you start looking at, okay, how much am I paying this person versus the results? So I would highly encourage that you either approach it as, hey, we're going to test this out with this new person, and we realize it's going to take a lot longer, or someone on the exec team needs to actually do some of this work themselves and build some type of framework and process. So then the SDR can follow that. They need to have some type of path or know what's going to work. If they just join on their own and there's nothing there, it's tough.
Yeah, let's unpack this a little more because I think this is a topic which I have been meaning to talk to you. And given your expertise of dealing with probably 100 clients, you've seen almost every spectrum, you've seen almost everybody coming from different industries. A lot of founders come to me hiring their first SDRs when they have never sold. And when I say never sold in the, at least in the industry or at least in the market they're trying to capture right now. So let's say there's a founder probably somewhere in Europe, India, Asia, anywhere, trying to sell to the US. Well, they don't have a single US customers. Single US customer. What advice would you give them? What is the right time for them to bring in the SDR? Because since they have not done it, it's kind of imperative for them to think, okay, I'm going to bring somebody who has done it. But like you said, some of these people are very young. They may or may not be able to figure it out. And ultimately, a founder has insane pressure from their investors and even from themselves to make this show successful.
It's a challenging thing to do if you don't have US clients and you're trying to break into the US. It's a lot of, you should be surprised, a lot of people around the world are trying to do that, and they'll hire a company like ours to do that. But that doesn't mean it's easy. No one knows who you are, right? A lot of your customers, they may not know who they are either because they're maybe in Asia or you name it. I don't think it's a bad idea to hire an SDR. I think the main thing is your approach in this scenario. Like if you hire an SDR, I would get them, if you're going to be targeting the US, I would get someone that's native English speaking. So that will help, less barrier or less, someone's cold calling. They're not going to be putting up the defenses quite as quick. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, is like something you need to understand that's going to take a longer time than if you're targeting your local market with an SDR, right? So it's going to be a lot slower in terms of building success. And then I also wouldn't isolate that person, right? You need to have them maybe working closely with the founder, right? Or closely with the team. So, or maybe marketing can help out a little bit to help give them some success or something to work off of, like a semi-warm lead. Because if they're just going in cold on their own into a new market, it's going to be challenging.
Fair enough. And I might be biased here, but I believe that as a founder, you have to gather or you have to get your first 10 customers at least on your own, like doing everything end to end, because I think it actually kind of makes you humble. It kind of helps you understand the importance of bringing an SDR. At the same time,
100%.
I think most of the successful founders, if I think about or if I've read their stories, or I think I was just on a podcast recently, not a podcast, I was listening to a webinar recently, which was a close event, where the founder, who is 10 million plus at revenue right now, he talked about how he used to send 160 emails a day, every single day. And all those emails used to be personalized. How he got his initial customers is an inspiring story. And I think, if I were working with that kind of founder as an SDR, I would also get inspired. Oh, you know what? This guy has already done it. So he understands where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very important that the founder or whoever's leading the sales team has done some of this before so they understand what the SDR is facing. Oftentimes, a founder will hire an outsourced team and have certain expectations around what would happen, yet no one's ever done it before. So where do they get this in their head? Like, this is what should be hit. Like, these are the goals that should be hit. So if it's never been done before within that company, it's really just a number they're pulling out of their pocket, right? So it's like, I think it's very important. It can humble them and make them realize how challenging cold outreach can be. So level sets the expectations.
But I'm pretty sure there would be scenarios which you have dealt with where the founder, let's say, wants to hire an agency like you, and in order to acquire their first customers, in order to build the pipeline initially, because maybe they are not equipped, maybe they don't have the pedigree, maybe they don't want to learn, maybe there are a million other reasons why they don't want to do it themselves. And they're like, hey, maybe teach me. And while I'm going to work with an agency like yours, maybe I'll learn a few things. In what scenarios do you feel that, or are there kind of products where you feel the agency model, even when you don't have a customer, will work?
Well, I think it's a very smart route to go in all the scenarios you're saying, right? It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be faster. You're going to be able to pivot quicker. You're going to have more tools and expertise at your disposal than doing it in-house or hiring, right? So there's all those reasons. The common problem I see is that a founder still looks for ROI with the agency, given that they've never done it before. So they're looking for results, which is understandable, but you also need to, typically SDRs would take 6 to 9 months just to ramp up and start getting ROI. But when a founder will outsource this, they'll give the agency 3 months, right? So there's a disconnect there. Rather than looking at, hey, we're going to test this and we're going to use this agency to help test and understand messaging and ICP, things like that. While that does happen, they also look for the ROI in the meantime. And so that's where there's a disconnect.
Yeah, I think I can relate to it because back in the day when I was working with sort of non-SaaS company, and when we were evaluating an agency, we had no idea what we're getting into either. And hiring an agency kind of felt like an uphill battle. And not because we were not sure about the agency. I think we were not sure about how the whole PMF would look like. Because in this case, we're fighting multiple battles. We don't have the PMF and there's investor pressure. There's pressure from all kinds. You have to prove to your company, right, that, this product can actually work. While I understand the point of, when you said there's expectation mismatch, how do you handle it? For example, let's say, maybe talk me through a story of a company who worked with you, who were successful in finding maybe a PMF or at least finding the initial customers.
Ultimately, meetings and generating leads for clients solves all problems. So that's the goal right now. How do you do that? It's a group effort, right? It's not 100% on us. It's not 100% on the client. It is a partnership. So we need to meet in the middle. Ultimately, we need to set goals with every client before we start. Every client is different. They have different products, services, deal sizes, sales cycles. And so for me to set a goal of another company with a current a current onboarding company, it just doesn't make sense, right? Ultimately, I need to better understand what's the average deal size and sales cycle, and then back that into our price and the package they're signing up for. And then we can kind of set some KPIs together. Typically, our clients will see somewhere around 2 to 3 meetings per week, but that doesn't really matter to the company that I'm talking to currently, because that might not make sense for them. They may need, based on their deal size, they may need 5, right? And so then we'll set that goal with them. But a lot of times the expectations are very unrealistic. So they'll say, I want 25 meetings a month, in which case we'll push back and be like, look, we can shoot for that, but we're not really seeing that in most cases. So where do you get this number from? Have you done it before? And so you can kind of push back a little bit. And oftentimes they don't have a good reason where they got this number. It's more so like they just came up with it and it sounds good. So we didn't need to level set with them. And then you could also, if you do get those numbers, this is how you would break it out, is like you get their average deal size, you get I get their close rate, let's just call it 10%, which is typical in SaaS. And you break it out, okay, how many meetings do you need per month that hold? And then based off your close rate, then you kind of back the math out. Okay, so if you're going to make a sale every X amount of meetings that are held versus our price and your deal size, then you can kind of work the math out and say, okay, so this will make sense, or maybe sometimes it won't, right? So those are the things we work on with our clients in onboarding.
Fair enough. And I think I agree that ROI is ultimately the goal. But I think early on, I want to also buy learning. Let me ask you this: since you mentioned how these founders come up with their arbitrary numbers of 25 meetings or something which looks good, or maybe sometimes these founders, and no offense, I think sometimes they promise these numbers to investors. Sometimes investors ask them for these numbers, and they have to bring it up in a small deadline. And in some cases, founders, because they have not done it, so they don't know, are these numbers even looking real? And they get the number from investors, they kind of agree, and then they are just trying to do this at all costs. Help me understand maybe a quick business model, or maybe a model in which, let's say, founders can understand what is realistic in the next 3 months if they were to, let's say, either do it themselves or maybe work with an agency.
I think 2 different scenarios. If they're going to do it themselves, they need to understand there's going to be a lot more cost involved, and it's going to take longer to do. That doesn't mean it's the wrong play though. It really depends on the company. Long term, if you're really going to build out a program and you really want to maybe have these SDRs turn into AEs, that might be the right play, but it's just going to take a lot longer and it's going to be more expensive to build out. So a lot of companies that are early stage, they don't have that luxury. They either don't have the time or they don't have the budget to build that out, in which case they would use an agency. Now, to set expectations, like you said, you're coming up with these numbers, it's really hard to know, right? Especially if they haven't done it before. And I've never worked with them before either. So you kind of have to run through these numbers and I can give them my averages. A lot of times what I feel like helps make realistic numbers is based off their deal size. So if they say, okay, our average deal size is 20,000, I feel more comfortable bumping that number slightly up in terms of an estimate than if they say it's 500,000. I actually would give them the lower estimate on our average because I know the deal size is bigger, which means it's likely going to be harder to set those meetings up for them. That's how I would do it with them and try to level set. Yeah.
Plus, given the higher deal size, we are also looking at the longer length of the cycle as well. And that means for them to see the ROI will also take longer, and hence either the pressure on the agency goes high or there's an uncertainty in the whole game. Now, tell me something. Since you work with non-tech and tech founders both, where do you see in terms of GTM, which one is harder?
Well, I think in the tech space, it's more common. People are more familiar with the tools. The people they're reaching out to are familiar with the motions and the terminology. So it's easier in that space. I think if you're using, like as a non-tech founder, if they have a good product market fit, I think it works a lot better. For example, we had a past client that had a very unique product, like not really any competitors. And so when you go and start reaching out to the market at a bit more scale, it really, really connects with people who are like, oh, wow, okay, this makes sense. Yeah, we do have these certain requirements we need to meet, and this product will help with that. And so like, that's where it actually really feels good building it out because people actually need the product. It's not just like another SEO agency or a web development agency where there's there's hundreds of them out there.
Amazing. I'm going to bring a very controversial question. I know these kind of companies were very popular, and I'm pretty sure you might have dealt with them directly, given that in your wheelhouse. The topic is AI SDR. So tell me something. I mean, I haven't explored much, but I know all the companies which popped up like a year ago. They were all the rage, and we don't see them anymore. I know everybody has their own opinion on this, and I know some of them kind of pivoted to only working with inbound. Now, if we were to put an AI SDR for, let's say, these non-tech founders or non-tech industries, like you said, how would that work? How would that look like? Where do you think they will still fail?
I think there's a use case for them on an inbound play. So if you're a company and you have lots of inbound leads, or maybe a huge list in your CRM, like that might make more sense. I think where it's really failing is on the cold outbound part. So I haven't used it personally myself. I'm biased. I have human SDRs, but all the people I've talked to at conferences or virtually, they all don't have good reviews. That they're no longer using them. Lots of mistakes. So I think if you're going to use them, use it on some type of inbound play. Maybe it could be form fills on your website, something like that. I think that's where the use case is going to make a lot more sense for you.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, all the companies we know of who use them have all been burned, and none of them has a positive review. Tell me this, like, given that there is so much information available out there today on how to crack GTM, and I'm pretty sure non-tech founders are trying to copy the same thing, like different playbooks, which has probably worked in SaaS and tech, trying to implement them in their own GTM. Where do you think they're failing?
I think there's so many tools out there that it's overwhelming. There's so many, and it's hard to know which ones to use. There's always something new coming up. Prices changing. I think that's one of the most challenging things is one, knowing all the tools and then actually implementing them. And it's very easy to get stuck with all these different tools and then like they're not all being used and then you're paying for them. And so I think that's one of the most challenging things with the go-to-market motion. I would suggest if you're a non-technical founder, I would suggest hiring somebody that is technical or has experience with this. So they'll already come with knowledge on which tools they've used in the past, or they'll at least know like, hey, these ones we should evaluate. And it's just going to cut a lot in terms of cost savings. and time savings too.
All the founders, for example, I know of, John, who are early stage, they often will resort to the feeling of, hey, I can hire an SDR myself. There is a common notion it's going to be cheaper, but you are fighting it against, saying that, hey, it's going to be expensive to hire in-house. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that notion even exists in the first place?
Well, it's not going to be cheaper. That's for sure. I guess it depends on where they're hiring the SDR. So I should backtrack a little bit, right? I'm speaking specifically in the United States, but if you're hiring an SDR, let's just say in the Philippines, then yeah, it might be cheaper. But you do have to, regardless of where you're hiring that SDR, if they're going to be internal, you need to have someone managing them. You need to have someone paying for the tools, and you need to have the tools being actually used. And so there's a lot more costs that go into that. Just simply think about, I know because just attracting SDRs that I want to hire myself, there's a lot of time that goes into job posting, reviewing applications, setting up interviews, onboarding, all that costs money and takes time. So just that alone, if you were to hire an agency, would be a huge savings, an operational lift off your plate.
I can validate that. I run something called School of SDR, and we deal with companies of all stages, primarily SMB and mid-market. And I think one of the things which we have seen, we're currently hiring for a company for the last 3 months, and their bar for hiring is extremely high. And we have given them about 45 SDRs, top-notch SDRs, all vetted personally by me, because they have a good budget. They're trying to hire in India somebody who has done this for at least 3-4 years. They have like a good, I would say, about $30,000-$40,000 budget per year, I think, which is really good for India. And we have not been able to hire for them, given that they have to have so many requirements. Sure, they might be already at 5 or 6 million, but in their case, we're dealing with, hey, we need an SDR who has done more than $40,000 ACV in the past. They have to be in a stable company for the last 2 years, and you know how volatile things are. And they have to be they have to be selling in the US market for more than 3 years and so on. They do not have to ask them for becoming an AE in the next 1 year. There are just so many filters. Now, imagine they have been struggling to hire SDR for 4 months. Assuming they were going to hire this month, it's going to take them 1 more month for the SDR to join, probably 2 more months for the SDR to get ramp up, and the quarter is over. And that means before they see any value, it's going to be April. So from that
6-month
point of
process
view,
at minimum.
Yeah, from that point of view, and we are not even including the time of the executives. So we have COO involved, we have the founder of the company involved, we have the head of the sales involved, we have somebody who's the chief of the staff who's involved, because it's an important role, important company, important everything. So given all those resources and the cost of it, from what I'm thinking, it's already, they've already probably spent $20,000 and they have not seen any results. And in this time, I think it would have made sense to bring in an agency.
Yeah. I'm curious to get your take on this. So they have all these requirements. You've put in front of them multiple people that, let's say, mostly fit the description that they want, maybe not perfect. What's your take on whether or not they need to fit everything, all the requirements in the SDR role? How important do you think that is? Or do you think it's more like, hey, there's other characteristics that are more important when it comes to an SDR?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think the requirements are arbitrary, and I see this all the time, but I don't try to fight it unless I think, some of those are going to be absolutely insane. There are a couple of things. I mean, I have managed SDR teams for 8 years, and I don't think so I ever looked at the kind of companies they worked at or even their resume, or as long as, they have the grit, perseverance, I believe they will be able to figure it out. I think we all have our own knack of hiring. I don't hire on vibes or anything, but yes, you do get a sense of, whether this SDR will perform better or not. I think most of my successful SDRs never had done the job before. Some of my best SDRs probably had like 18 months sabbatical. They were 18 months sabbatical, came back. They had a different life experience. Some of them come from, different retail backgrounds. I come from a different background altogether. I've never done sales before I started sales. So I think companies sometimes are very fixated, but at the same time, I also feel because they feel like, we are paying the top dollar, so we should be able to get all the requirements met. And sometimes because of their past experiences, they also feel like because we were successful when we did this, they're trying to replicate this in the new organization as well. So I honestly don't believe all that. I mean, I train people who come from zero sales experience, and in fact, all of my SDRs are top performer of the year, top performer of the quarter, month on month, year on year. So I don't believe in those requirements.
I agree. I've hired a lot of SDRs too, and some of the best I have come from non-traditional backgrounds, or they didn't have direct SDR experience. They had experience talking to people, and that combined with personality traits or some type of grit, some type of challenges they had to overcome are way more important than whether or not they graduated from college, right? Things like that.
Yeah, and I think one of the thing where we are struggling to, let's say, fill in this position is because a lot of senior SDRs whom we are presenting, they're also full of entitlement at this stage because they feel like they have been grinding for the last 3 years. So they're looking for the natural next promotion, more money. I think money aside, even if the companies are able to pay, there is a sense of entitlement that, hey, we've done this for 3 years. We need a lead position or we need a direct path to account executive. And we both know companies are going to lie that it's going to happen and it's not. And then they're trying to avoid that whole path of going into the drudgery of, going to another company and later figuring it out. So it's crazy.
Yeah, if you want an SDR with experience, they're typically going to if they go to a new role, they're going to want to go into an AE position and move up. And so it's tough to hire an experienced SDR with also no potential promotions in the future. So that's
and I
tough.
think this is a fight which I have with founders all the time or sales leader. I'm like, think about this, that this is your SDR market, and out of which these are the SDRs who are going to fit your requirement. These are the SDRs who want to work with you. And then if you start thinking about all the filters, we are left with a very tiny fraction of the people you would actually be able to hire from. Now, there is a possibility you would not be able to afford them. They don't want to work with you. They have multiple offers. They choose somebody else. So there are just so many variables here. And in this meantime, what you're losing, which is the most important thing, time. And I remember I think I wrote an article earlier ago, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, where I talked about the downside of, delayed GTM. Like you're thinking of GTM right now and you need the leads right now, you need the meetings right now. And if it happens in April, you're already 2-3 months behind. And if your sales cycle is 60 days or 90 days, then you're 2 quarters behind if you look at it from that point.
Well, a lot of the advice I see, and I also stand by this, is a lot of companies will wait so long to go to market because they're trying to perfect the product. But then they forget that they've never actually gone to market to understand what the people want. So they don't know, they're building something that they're not even sure that people are going to be using. And so a lot of the advice is that you actually just want to get started, even with the product won't be perfect, but over time you can make adjustments and adapt based off of client feedback.
Yeah, I think I've been there. I remember working with a company where founder was so fixated on making sure everything is so perfect. We kept pivoting. We pivoted like twice or thrice because the moment we launched the product, the competitor was way ahead of us because of their proximity to the customers, whatnot. And I think at the speed at which they were performing, and we were just not allowed to, go at that speed given that, we wanted the product to be perfect. And I think the whole system collapsed. Tell me something. Now, you said that, a non-tech founder or non-tech SaaS founder would probably need a technical person to set all this up. Is there a way they can, let's say, keep the cost minimum, assuming that some companies do not want to work with an agency? They want to keep things in-house. What is the best course of action for them to get started? Founders, should they hire a leader or should they do it themselves?
I would go with a fractional route. You hire someone fractional, like a fractional sales leader or fractional revenue leader, and they can help. Like they're not going to be full time, so it's going to be cheaper, but they have the knowledge and they can guide the founder. Okay, these are the things you want to get in place. I know a few people, I know these tools, and so they can help in that scenario, and it won't be as expensive. Now you won't get the full amount of time, but really what you're looking for is the guidance and the knowledge.
Are there no companies right now, and I'm just thinking out of the blue, who will do like a turnkey project? Who would say, hey, you know what, you pay us this dollar, we're going to set up your email inboxes, everything. And we're just going to give you everything where you can just start pushing your data and, do whatever you want after that.
So it's like just the setup process and then they
just
back
the setup
out.
Process. Yeah.
I think some agencies are starting to do that. Some of the Clay agencies, some of the people I've talked to that are more focused on Clay and building out processes for They changed their model from building it within their clay and their tools to going into the company and doing that. Now, I don't know how you scale that. That seems difficult, but I have talked to a few small agencies that are starting to do that because the company finds that more valuable to keep the tools and the processes in-house, which I can understand.
I mean, I can imagine that will be a better model. I'm thinking like a founder myself. If I were to do it, I'm like, hey, I don't want to waste time in figuring out which tools are best. But if there's a John I can trust who would say, hey, I have used these tools in the last 10 years for my own agency and I can vouch for them. He's going to take up this project, help me set it up. I think I can see value in that.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of advice, which I've also heard, John, is around, hey, let me hire a GTM leader first because they will know what to do. And I'm talking about, of course, companies, non-tech companies who are trying to do GTM for the first time. What is your advice on then? When is the right time to do that?
That's tough. I think a lot of it depends on the company itself and where they're at, because there are some companies that are not in the typical software. I think we live in a bubble, and a lot of the stuff we do, speaking to SDR, you know what's funny is some people don't even know what SDRs are in some of my sales calls. So I need to also remember that everyone I'm talking to isn't in the same world that I am in, and so I need to not use acronyms and be like sales reps. Right. And so I think it's tough. Depends on where these companies are. For example, we just started working with a company in the oil and gas space. And this is the first time they're doing outbound, and they've been around for over 20 years. So some companies are going to be a lot more established and they have a higher budget to test something like this out versus a sub company that's pretty new is going to have a shorter leash in terms of setting something up and how much they can spend and how much time they can let this play out. I'm not giving you a great answer because I think it's really company dependent. In the case of the company that's trying to get something going up quick, maybe a newer company, maybe they're trying to prove out results to their investors. If you can stomach it, I'd hire in-house and then try to get them to have a plan in place before you hire them on how it would be built out. And so you have something to follow. If you don't have that already built out yourself.
I can totally see, how this could be so much confusing. And given that there is so much content already available, I can see the biggest problem would be prioritizing. Like, what should I prioritize first? Which advice should I take first? And speaking of advice, tell me, what are some of the common advices which you feel these founders believe, which were completely untrue or which were completely way off?
Meaning what? Like different types of plays, like different types of outbound scenarios?
Yeah, different types of plays, which they kind of try to copy. Sometimes it may have worked, sometimes it may not have. But what are some of the advices which you feel that they are consuming while you knowing that those are advices should not be taken?
I think one thing that comes up a lot is, so people will be, okay, I want to use multi-channel. I want to use these channels because I was told it was working for their colleague, or whatever, another company there in their space. One thing that's important to know is, where are the people you're trying to reach out to, your ideal customer profile? Where are they hanging out? Are they likely to answer their phone? Are they likely to be behind their computer all day and maybe an email will work well? Are they even on LinkedIn? Right? Some people they're not even on LinkedIn, depending on the space you're trying to target. And so if a company comes to us and why would we suggest LinkedIn if the people are on a factory in a manufacturing plant and they're not behind their computer, and they're probably, if they have a LinkedIn, haven't looked at it in a few years, right? So I think it's important to recommend, or at least the starting point is, where are these people actually likely to pick up and respond? So that will vary from company to company.
Makes sense.
So that's something I think people get that advice. And I think it's important to first take a step back and be, okay, well, let's see, where have I gotten in touch with these people in the past when I've done any type of outreach, and start with those channels.
I cannot agree more. I think this also applies to even tech companies, and we are seeing that a lot. I think a recent vertical SaaS company, I believe, who were trying to sell, plumbing software or something, and I remember they chose not to.
Tough one.
HVAC, right? You know where I'm going with this, right? And I remember they had to stay off LinkedIn. Some of them had to do even door to door initially to get and acquire the initial customers. And then there are events which are which I had not even heard of because all we hear is all the sales tech events, right? I worked in different industry, but this event was like, I did not even know this existed. This was in a small town, which you and I'm pretty sure you would know the town, but I had not even heard of the town where this event was happening. And this founder, their sales team was hanging out. Their sales team was actually doing door to door. And some of them were field reps. They had like a different mechanism altogether. Some of them did not even rely on emails because they're like, hey, my customers are not even checking their emails as often as we think. And very untraditional approach. And it's a totally different beast altogether. And I remember the last I checked, that company was doing really, really well.
Yeah. So I agree. Home services is a completely different field. They're not, unless it's a bigger company, they're not even they rarely even go on their computer. They're on their phones all day. And it's a lot of text messages and phone calls. And like, if you start trying to go down the email route and start trying to have them do a screen share, like those things just take forever or likely won't happen. So it is important to understand the persona and like a plumber, right? Just think about it. When do you think they actually go to the computer? Like probably not at all throughout the day.
I doubt they would even check emails. I remember we once, I used to work with a company where we were selling recording software for calls. This is at least 5 years ago. And this industry was so nascent, so niche, that this guy was always on the move. And he said, I am going to check my emails like once a day. I'm like, who are you?
Yeah, crazy. When I'm checking my email 20 times a day.
Yeah.
So a little bit different.
We all are the same. Great, John. This has been super fun. I appreciate the honesty. Thank you for going so deep on the messy part of the GTM. I believe that most people only talk about on slides, and there's so much advice around the GTM. So thank you for being honest here. My final question to you, if there is one person you would want to recommend who you believe should come on the podcast next, who would that be?
I would have Scott Leese on.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you know Scott Leese on LinkedIn?
Definitely. Yeah. I was thinking of bringing him on the 25th. We are at least 6 or 7 episodes away. But yes, I'm definitely going to reach out and tell him that you recommend it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
Yeah. Pleasure.